Caring for the Children of Abraham, Chapter 4. I worked in the operating room and recovery room for the first couple of days, and I asked people to request permission for me to stay at Hadassah. By then, the 6-day war was over. The fresh casualties were few. The operations being done were secondary patient returns to the operating room for debridement, bowel closure, amputation, secondary closure of wounds, cosmetic plastic surgical repair, burn graft, and complications. One benefit of supervising the anesthetist in the operating room was that it allowed the physician anesthesiologist to float back to the recovery room to keep an eye on patients there. We occasionally found post-operative patients who needed attention, and the very excellent recovery nurses were happy to see us come through to help evaluate post-operative bleeding, an airway problem, a down lung, incomplete neuromuscular block reversal, emergence delirium, pain, fever. The operating room was very busy for the next 2 weeks. The doctors came back from their military units. We heard the war stories. One doctor, a neurosurgeon, survived the Sinai campaign, drove his car through the Orthodox section of Jerusalem, and was hit in the forehead with a rock thrown through his windshield by an Orthodox Jew objecting to vehicular transport through his neighborhood. The hospital did not discriminate. The patients were Arab and Israeli, Muslim and Jew. All the patients were cared for equally. There were Egyptian and Jordanian wounded prisoners of war right next to wounded Israelis, and there were Arab and Jew civilians in the hospital as well, neighbors all. This was a domestic quarrel, a family fight. They each knew how they got there and what to expect from each other. A lanky Arab in one bed, a short Jew in another, steady eyes, some friendly smiles, little bravado, but mostly acceptance, calm, dignity, healing. For them, the fight was over. Hebrew was spoken sometimes in a harsh-sounding tone, sometimes sweetly melodic and with a slight French accent. Israelis were from many countries, many cultures. Some were very Arabic, some European. There were dark and heavy people from the Middle East and light and fair from Morocco. There were Eastern European, Russians, English, South Africans, and Americans. They were people who were born there. There were people who were born there. There were people who had just arrived. The Sabras, the name given those born in Israel, on Israeli soil, after the desert cactus, had qualities of cockiness, cheek, and can-do aggressiveness, which I at the same time admired, emulated, and dreaded. Some Europeans tended to be a bit pompous, others were delightful, and the Americans tended to be Americans, good and bad. During the war, energy was high, positive, survival. Things happened very fast, very alive, very condensed in time, births, life, death. Death seemed to have touched every family, or at least most families. Everyone lost friends. There were marriages, babies were being born. It was dreadfully sweet, exciting, open, and so very alive. There was a sense of purpose and meaning, a useful application of skills, welcome, adventure. War was not less, but more. I could not merge with the celebration of the Israeli victory. There was so much to mourn, but I understood it. It was like the release that one feels after caring for a loved one in a lingering death. It was over. The emotions just come out of you, tears and laughter, relief. I did not feel right going into the old city after the war. When I did go, I felt humbled and awed by the city's history and by what had just happened there. I walked the route that some of my soldier patients had taken in the battle for the old city. There were flowers where soldiers had fallen on a street near a wall, with people now streaming by on a way that had been closed to them for years. There was a certain festive air that seemed to be out of place to me, that I had to try to understand. In the Middle East, nothing burns so strongly in the heart or calls so loudly to a refugee as home, to a patriot as where his people's blood has spilled, to the devout where their spiritual masters worshipped, realized their vision, taught, and died. To a soldier, his war; to a politician, his power; to parents, their children; to the victors, their celebration. At the Wailing Wall, there was reverence. To be continued.